Good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll start this formal briefing. Before that, I think I'll request my colleagues to distribute the report which we will be presenting here. Some of the findings are already mentioned in that report. Yes, then of course, some of the things which are not mentioned and supposed to be made orally, I'll be mentioning here. First of all, we'd like to thank you all the excellencies and the distinguished representatives who are present here. And when actually we decided to hold this briefing, we are not sure as to whether there would be enough interest on this issue. And briefing is not something which we have been organizing for a long time, but we thought this is an important topic relating to a situation which people are fairly not aware of, even in terms of the geography. So we are talking about, I think, the Chittagong Hill Tracts of Bangladesh, which shares borders with the Rakhine state of Myanmar, which has almost become the newest proto-state in the region. So we are not sure about whether there would be an interest on this particular topic. And we thought this should be of interest to the people from the diplomatic missions, as well as those who follow the regional peace security issues. And we ourselves, of course, are concerned about the peace and security issues. So at the outset, I think my name is Suhas Chakma. I work as the director of this Organization for Rights and Risk Analysis Group. As my surname shows, the Chakma is a surname. So it's a community which lives in the northeastern parts of India, Chittagong Hill Tracts of Bangladesh, as well as the Rakhine state of Myanmar. So if you look at it, the Chakmas are the communities which are quite one of the dominant groups in these three provinces or states, in these three countries. So in that sense, I am actually not an expert on the issues. I am more of somebody who is subject matter for the experts. Somebody like me only provides inputs to the experts, and experts are supposed to provide the information to the stakeholders who are present here. So in that sense, I think we thought it would be quite useful to share our perceptions, somebody who, is connected with the communities in these three parts of the region, in the southeast of, in the eastern part of South Asia. And initially, when we set out to do the research, we were actually doing only research of a small community which is known as the Bom community in Bangladesh. Their population is about 13,000. They have an insurgent group. They were accused of having some kind of links with the Islamic groups. Then the entire community was basically implicated in a bank robbery case. So when we started to do the research, we actually wanted to find out whether there is some truth in it, simply because the community has been actually ethnically cleansed in Bangladesh. Because out of the 13,000 people, when we visited Mizoram, there are about 3,500 people there, and about 144 persons from 2 years to 72 years, they were arrested for being engaged in this bank robbery. So you can imagine when a community of 13,000 people actually gets implicated in this kind of a situation. It doesn't make any news. Even if it makes news, it's such a small community. So we actually had set out in the beginning when we are conducting this research what kind of implications it has, because these small ethnic groups being wiped out completely from their lands and territories actually doesn't come in the picture. Then when we started this research, when we are publishing, I think in the last 15 days, we saw unprecedented violence in the Chittagong Tracts region of Bangladesh, which is next to the Cox's Bazar and the Rakhine province, where you have 1 million plus, and our estimate is much more than the Rohingya refugees. So there are conflicts which are brewing up, and what could be done and what could not be done on these issues. But then again, organizing a briefing on Bangladesh is very difficult, because everybody has the perception that there has been a revolution, and it is the interim government is headed by somebody who had received the Nobel Prize for Peace. So, and I think this is the only government in the world where I could say that, you know, I mean, I know some people who are serving as the advisors to the caretaker government, whom I know quite intimately, because we have fought for human rights, worked on human rights issues for the last 3 decades. So they have certain amount of credibility in the civil society sectors before the international community. And for us to come and speak about the situation in Bangladesh, it's very, very difficult. Especially, I think, we know less about the worldviews of Dr. Yunus. He's a banker. He received Nobel Peace Prize for helping out the poor in the society. But at the end of the day, I think we did not know about his worldviews. And still, I think we are trying to find out what is this gentleman about. So when we sent out this invitation 1st of October, I think we had some doubts how are we going to present the situation in Bangladesh and the situation in Myanmar, though they are connected, because they are connected to each other. I think the developments in the last 1 week has helped us to figure out to a certain extent what is Dr. Muhammad Yunus is about. He gave an interview to the Voice of America on 2nd of October on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. And there was one specific question as to what is he going to do with respect to the situation in the Chittagong Tracts. And if I may ask, if I may quote, I mean, what he said, then he started saying, quote, we just got here. It's not right to hope that the problem that has been there for so long can be solved in a couple of days. There was a peace accord. It happened after trying for many years. That accord is not being implemented. Whether or not a new peace accord must be made, our government won't be able to accomplish that. Elected governments later on will be able to take that on, unquote. So here I think we have a situation where the head of the government of Bangladesh has undertaken reforms on everything. He is reforming the constitution, he is reforming the electoral system, he is reforming the judiciary, he is reforming the anti-corruption system, public administration. But when it came to the Chittagong Tracts, he basically said, this is not my responsibility. The question is, for how long this responsibility is not with him, and when is he going to hold the elections? And then I think yesterday he had mentioned that the elections will be held only after reform processes are completed. So in that sense, I think the Chittagong Tracts issue, which is witnessing massive human rights violations, is not on the radar, is not on the responsibility of the government. And I think what has happened the day before yesterday, on 6th of October, he formed this constitutional reform Commission. And Constitutional Reform Commission has only 9 members, and out of 9 members, there is only 1 woman, and there are no indigenous peoples. The population of the indigenous peoples is about 1.6 million, and there are no representation from the religious minorities, who are about 16 million. So I think this, in a way, defines the worldview of Dr. Yunus, that the Nobel laureate, I mean, for peace, I think, in our view, does not, in a way, reflecting the spirit of the students' movement which took place in Bangladesh. So this exclusion is, I think, is quite concerning. So I think these were my preliminary comments as to why we have come to a situation where Bangladesh and Myanmar could be equated with. I think there is no dispute whatsoever with the fact that the Myanmar is having a serious civil war. For the first time after 78 years since its independence, it has collapsed. It doesn't exist in most of the territories, and we do not believe that the Myanmar government, despite having access to large quantities of exportable resources, whether it's timber, jade, gems, fish, would be in a position to recapture the territories it had lost. And we have at this point of time a proto-state, a quasi-state, which has emerged in Arakan province. Arakan army at this point of time covers about 20,000 square kilometers, so almost 80% of the territories of the Rakhine state, plus some areas from the Chin state, except Sittwe, the capital. The Arakan army basically controls everything. I think it's a matter of time when Sittwe falls and the Arakan army actually establishes its control over the territory. We do not know how the states are going to deal with it, but they emerge or they exist at this point in time as the de facto government in Arakan, and of course it's very difficult for a number of governments, especially those who are in the neighborhood. And there is supposed to be actually some preliminary talks which is being held in Indonesia, Jakarta. I think it's tomorrow or it has already taken place. We do not know what will be the outcome of these talks on this Myanmar issue prior to the ASEAN summit in Laos. But I think we are quite clear that that Myanmar is in a civil war. Now I think that particular view may slightly differ in Bangladesh. I think there would be disagreement whether Bangladesh is in a civil war, but I think there are signs that Bangladesh is facing some kind of or is about to face potential civil war. It's precisely because I think Bangladesh is, rather than the Republic of Bangladesh, it has always been the Vendetta Republic, where vengeance plays the most critical part while deciding political future. And I think we all know former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina tried to establish one-party rule. That's her rule, and that's a fact which cannot be denied. But at this point in time, I think there are two particular trends which are important to be noted. One is the government of Bangladesh has proposed amendment to the International Crimes Tribunal Act of 1973. So with this amendment, they are saying a political party which is involved in genocide and mass murder shall be banned for 10 years. And there is only one political party which is facing genocide charges, that's the Awami League. And the second thing which is taking place, I think second round of discussion has been completed now with the political parties. And in these discussions of the political parties, the Yunus government has not included 14-party alliance of the Awami League. So in a way, he is trying to establish a government minus the Awami League and 14-party alliance. Then obviously at certain point of time, when the situation gets worse or improves or whatever, this 14-party alliance are going to get back. And because at the end of the day, they are also the largest political party. They ruled for 15 years. They brought independence in the country. So I think the conclusion which we could draw at this stage is that Dr. Muhammad Yunus has missed the opportunity for not being inclusive, and the country at certain point of time, sooner than later, has to face some kind of a civil war. And how that would be, I think we cannot foretell, but I think it's very, very clear. But I think the briefing which we are holding today is not so much about the mainstream politics in Bangladesh or mainstream politics in Myanmar. We just wanted to highlight on two particular issues. That is, in Myanmar as well as in Bangladesh, the indigenous peoples and ethnic minorities are actually being subjected to, it's a strong word to use the ethnic cleansing, but literally, they are being driven away. I think we know, and it has been recorded, that the Rohingyas have been facing textbooks kind of genocide, as was mentioned by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in 2017 and 2018. But what usually actually doesn't get into the news is what is happening in the neighborhood that's in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. So you could see that in the Rakhine state, the entire military junta earlier, and now I would say Arakan army, they want to ensure that other people who look ethnically, physically, religiously different, you basically take them out. And in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, that is exactly what is happening. And in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, I think it has been happening for a long time. I think what is important for us to remember is that on 5th August this year, when Arakan army has captured almost the entire territories, there were attacks on the Rohingyas. Nobody claims responsibility. About 200 Rohingyas had been killed. So in a way, it shows that in the future framework of the Arakan state, that's going to be very, very difficult to resolve. But what is happening in the Chittagong Tract is completely different. We are quite shocked to find that there had been in the Chittagong Tracts implantation of the majority Muslim population in the Chittagong Tracts from 1979 to 1983 with the sole purpose to reduce the indigenous populations into a minority on their own land. And worse, I think we have provided the notification to the government of Bangladesh. Even today, at this point of time, about 24,511 families in Khagrachari district and 1,486 families of illegal settlers in Rangamati districts are provided free food rations. So for all their well-being, feeding, etc., is taken care of by the government of Bangladesh. They have been taking care of these settlers who have been transmigrated from mainland into the Chittagong Tracts, and it's almost now 40 years now. They have been providing free rations. So in a way, it sustains the conflict. And some of the funds, of course, Bangladesh is slightly better off now, but in earlier times they used to use the funds of the donor community. And one more thing which has happened with this is that the Rohingya refugees are being settled in the Chittagong Tracts in large numbers. In large numbers they are being settled. So this, because there are no physical conflict, it did not come out in the newspapers. or it doesn't usually come into the focus of the international community. So on 19th September this year, there were attacks on the indigenous peoples, which was perpetrated by the Bangladesh army as well as the illegal settlers. In the beginning, on 18th of September, there was a death of a settler who was actually caught in a theft case of a motorcycle. That case on 18 September was used to attack the entire communities, and we have in the report provided the FIR, which is the first information report filed by the wife of the deceased, saying that he was killed by his own community fellows, and indigenous peoples did not have anything to do with that. But nonetheless, I think once there were attacks which took place on 19 September, there were about 5 to 9 people who were killed. Hundreds of houses have been burned down, and I think we provided the list which was prepared partly by the district administration of Bangladesh. So we basically found 175 persons who were injured, 142 houses which were set ablaze, Buddhist temple which were looted, destroyed, etc. And I think one thing which has happened with this is that the attacks actually took place only in the town areas of the districts or the sub-districts. And because there is segregation of the communities, so effectively the indigenous communities are no longer able to participate in any economic activity in Bangladesh. So the economic backbone of the indigenous peoples in the Chittagong tracts has been broken. People live in fear. People live in fear because you cannot even now travel to Chittagong because physical features are different. Sporadic violence are taking place, and people who work in the EPZs, export processing zones, and etc., they cannot move around freely. So I think at certain stage, I think India is going to see, you could say, silent migration of the population because the conflicts are intensifying. So as I said, this is actually not a new thing. In October 2022, this 13,000 Bom community who belong to the Mizo, Kuki, and Jo community. All of you hear about the violence in Manipur between the ethnic Kukis and the Meitei community. So they belong to that community, but they have been completely wiped out because their entire population is about 13,000. And in the beginning, their armed group was actually created by the Bangladesh army for its own counter-insurgency operations. Then they accused this community of being engaged in or having links with the Islamic groups who are based there, the the Rohingya Islamic groups. Then they carried out various serious human rights violations. And at this point of time, I think 3,000, 500,000 people, as I said, are in Bangladesh, in Mizoram state of India. They are not in a position to go back, and they possibly shall not go back. And the lands which have been vacated are being taken over by the settlers who are illegally being settled there and the Rohingya refugees. And when I say settlers, illegal settlement, actually Bangladesh still has a law which is called the Chittagong Hill Tracts 1900 regulation, which in a way prohibits settlement of the non-indigenous peoples there. So with this, I think we have a new conflict which is emerging between the indigenous peoples in the CHT and the illegal settlers and the Rohingya refugees. It's already taking place at a low intensity scale, but it's going to emerge. And when we visited, I think we found, in a way, because both sides of the border, these communities live. One could see the traction of the indigenous communities also towards armed struggle. It would be wrong not to note that, and also partly because I think in the beginning of this century, after September 11, I think, the romanticism with the insurgency had died down. But I think the fall of the Myanmar's junta in the last 1 year has changed the situation completely. I think there is more traction towards violence. That's one thing. The second thing is, as I said, in one hand you have the Rohingya refugees who will not be accommodated in Arakan province. On the other hand, Bangladesh government is pushing the Rohingyas inside the Chittagong tracts and other parts of the country. And we have given the statistics here. As per the UNHCR report, in August this year, there were 994,124 Rohingya refugees in the camps. That's the official estimate of the UNHCR. But if you look in our report, that the Rohingya refugees, when the government of Bangladesh had conducted the biometric census, there were about 1.1 million Rohingya refugees, and plus there are about 344,000 children who are below 12 years, because you have to be above 12 years to be biometrically documented. So there are, at that point of time, also about 1.5 million Rohingya refugees. So in the camps, at this point of time, you only find less than 1 million. So as per official figures themselves, there are 500,000 Rohingya refugees who have fled or who are not in the camps. And the UNHCR, when they come out with the initial figures in 2019, the UNHCR had stated that the Rohingya refugee population growth rate per year was about 45,000 people. So the population should be increasing. But we have given in the report, with the data of the UNHCR, it says that in December 2018, the population of the Rohingya refugees was 906,000 people, and that figure in 2019 reduced to 854,000 people. So as per the official figures, which is accessible in the UNHCR website, and we have provided, attached the copies so that, it becomes easier to find the information. So even at that point of time, I think within 1 year, 54,000 people had already fled. And that is notwithstanding the population growth rate and, of course, death rate. So what we have in the Chittagong tracts at this point in time, I think, in one hand, we have one proto-state which has emerged, that is the Arakan state. Then you have the Chittagong tracts, people having the same ethnicity being driven away from this side. Then conflict is going to increase. And this conflict, I think, will intensify the moment the UNHCR and others in the international community stop supporting the refugees. I mean, if we look at the support to the refugees all over South Asia, whether it's the Afghan refugees, the Bhutanese refugees, Rohingya refugees, at certain point of time, I think the international community is not able to provide support, because if it continues for 20 years, 30 years, they can't provide supports. There are new issues which come up, the new priorities come up, and if that in a way happens, I think we have million plus population inside the camps just waiting to explode. And I think that is going to affect Bangladesh, that is going to affect Chittagong tracts, and that is going to affect the Southeast Asian countries because a large number of Rohingyas also try to cross over to the Southeast Asian countries. The moment camps are closed down, I think we'll have the traffickers and all other gangs operating. So at this point of time, I think I don't know how to describe the situation except the fact that from yesterday, the government of Bangladesh has banned or prohibited entry of even the Bangladeshi tourists in the Chittagong tracks. And this ban shall remain in force for 1 month. So it means that situation is really, really deteriorating very fast. And for the first time, we have a situation where the Buddhist community in the Chittagong tracks will not be celebrating what is called the Kathin Chibar Dana. It's a religious program once the monks complete the rain retreat. They have, so all these programs are cancelled because of the lack of security. We do not expect any kind of major attacks, today, tomorrow, or day after tomorrow, because of the Durga Puja for the Hindu minorities. But we are quite certain that once the election process starts, Bangladesh is going to witness massive attacks on the Hindu minorities because they always use an excuse. So, you cannot go and attack at this point of time a religious function during the religious program. But when the political violence comes up, everything will be justified in the name of political violence. And I think India faces, in my view, massive silent migration. I think the migration of the Hindus have been documented very well. From Hindus from Bangladesh to India. I think what is not documented and what is not known is the fact that in Bangladesh, in and around Dhaka, there used to be about 100,000 Rakhine people belonging to the Arakanese. They all had to flee. Whoever was left, they have gone back to Arakan state, and many of the people from the Bandarban district, which borders Arakan state, they are going back to the Arakan province, which is now being controlled by the Arakan army. So I think the final conclusion which I wanted to speak is, I think there is massive support which should be there for the interim government of Bangladesh so that it can get its feedback. But at the end of the day, I think if there is not going to be enough space for the religious minorities, for the indigenous peoples, as well as possibly the political opponents which they will settle, I think we are going to see massive conflict both in Arakan as well as in the CHT because ethnicity of these communities are the same. And, these days information passes very fast. People get their own ideas. And we all know about, how violent extremism, gets traction. And it's reality. The reality is, I think it is impossible for the indigenous peoples in Bangladesh to move around freely because the physical features are of the Tibeto-Mongoloid. They can be easily identified. And the majority community is actually different from them. And when you have the government of the day, which is the Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, clearly saying that we cannot deal with the Chittagong Trek issue, you cannot be included in the constitutional reform process, it basically means there is no space for them. So part of the briefing for this is our request to see whether in the communications or the interventions or through your missions to the government, these particular facts could be brought out. Because all of us at the end of the day want some kind of stability. There is a need for peace in the region. The problems ought to be resolved through dialogue and by giving space to everybody. But now if those particular spaces which is available to the communities in Bangladesh, and for the Chittagong region, which is the only region where indigenous people are still minority, I think the moment they cross the border, they enjoy all the rights as citizens. But the moment they enter, it's absolute military rule. You know, your identity cards, etc., being checked in different points, and you are not able to move freely. So obviously, after the recent change in Bangladesh, people want those freedoms. And that's why I think the riots started. The riots started only with one particular reason. I think on 18th September, copying the name of the majority Bengali student, they started the student movement called Anti-Conflict and Anti-Discrimination Tribal Students Movement. So the students came together. I think 40,000 people came. It was never seen in the hill tracts. Indigenous people live in far-flung areas that you have 40,000 people occupying the district town, and the military immediately decided to crack down. And at this point of time, they have, I think, filed 3 complaints, the FIRs, just against 300 people, 400 people, 500 people, so that nobody could come and protest. So if you do not have the democratic space, then of course you express in other ways. And this problem, unfortunately, is being fueled by the interim government. And I think they might have differences with the Awami League. But I think what is more concerning is the fact that you are not including the indigenous peoples, you are not including the religious minorities who are together almost 18 million people. So if 18 million people are left out and not made part of the entire process, I think it's a case for concern for the international community. So I'll stop here. Sorry being for such a long presentation. Then I think we'll open the floor. We'll stop the recording now so that it could be free discussion.